Hi, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about physics. And if you recall from the last video, we um, went ahead and moved the gameplay scene up to the top so we could preview it. Before I get into the physics, I want to go ahead and rearrange that, bring that back down under instructions, and you can see you'll get a blue line that indicates it's back where you want to put it. So it's back where it needs to be. And now we're going to talk about physics. Now I'm not going to build the physics on the gameplay just yet. I want to take a little segue and talk about physics in another project that I created, which is a physics primer.hype. Now let's talk about how Hype sees physics. Hype emulates the real world physics, and the simplest way I can explain it is to say you have air or space that things move around in. You have some things that move, like a solid movable object that has mass. It can run into things, bounce into things, or just float in space. You also have solid and movable objects, so the ground or a mountainside or a rock or a tree, anything that's going to be pretty much static. It's not going to take off anywhere, but it's going to be there very solid so that when the movable object hits it, something happens. And a lot of times in gaming and other CGI, you'll hear it called collision. So it actually collides with this and then something will happen. So right now, if you click on the physics inspector, looks like a little atomic symbol, you come over and you can apply physics to elements. Let's talk about everything that we see here first. You don't do it necessarily to the scene, but what you do is you apply to the elements. Now scene physics gravity I'll talk about here in a second. The solid movable object, we can go and you can actually apply three types of physics to it. Inactive, which is right now, it does nothing. It just sits there. It's just a shape on a screen, just like a layout on a print page. Static interacts without movement, means it can stand there, and if something runs into it, something will happen. So it could be a rock or, like I said, a tree. Or dynamic, full physics body. This allows it to actually move in space. It's either going to go down or it's going to go up. That's pretty much the extent of the physics, but I'm going to show you some tricks on how to make it do all kinds of crazy movements in space that make it more interesting. But for right now, let's go ahead and I just want to show you what things look like in the preview. If everything is inactive, no physics applied, you can see there it is. Nothing really happens. Now, if I go ahead and take this one and I apply dynamic full physics body, and I go to preview, you can see it floated up. Wonder why. If I come down here, I told you I wanted to talk about scene physics gravity. The force, this is the force of gravity. In this, you either have positive values, which make things drop, or you have negative values, which make things float. So for right now, if I want to make this drop, I would do 1, force of 1 gravity. And I come back up to preview, and you can see it falls. And what happened? It just fell right through the solid and movable object. That's because we haven't assigned physics to this yet. Right now it still is inactive, so it doesn't even see it. The movable object thinks it's just more air. So let's go back to the solid and movable object now, and we're going to say static interacts without movement. Let's go ahead and preview. And there you go. It gets a real nice natural look to it. It falls, it bounces, and it rolls a little bit. So you could do that with a timeline, but the thing is with the timeline, you'd have a lot of keyframes, and also think of timelines as strings to a puppet. Here with physics, you're cutting the strings. It can pretty much, the objects, the elements can do whatever they want, depending on how you set up things in space. So now what I want to show you too is if you take this, you see these sliders. Density is the weight of an object. So if you increase the density, let's bring it all the way up there, watch what happens. Falls like a lead weight, and it also has more mass to it that it's going to move. If you take that, put it there, you add more bounce. Let's take the density way down and put a real crazy bounce on it and watch what happens. All the way up there. It's going to keep going higher and higher, off into space, and it'll take longer to come back down. So we can adjust the bounce about right there, the density about right there. Friction is, think of the air molecules in the air pushing against the object as it falls. Same with air drag. Air drag, the more air drag and friction you have, the slower it's going to fall. You can see how it falls real slow and then settles to the ground. That would be really neat if you were going to try to do something that's floating down in water, underwater. It could be a really nice effect. All right, now what I told you though is on the way physics works in HYPE, you're either going to go up or you're going to go down. However, what we can do is we can create a scaffolding. It almost looks like a Rube Goldberg machine in some ways, or a pinball machine, by putting flippers and bumpers all throughout the space, and you can make things appear to move in really erratic and unpredictable ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that solid immovable object up here, and I'm going to shorten it. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to keep it as static, and I'm going to take this one here, make it a little bit like that, and I'll bring another one over here. I'm going to drag this out, and then I will put maybe like that. Let's go ahead and angle it, and you can watch what happens next. Falls. Oh, gets stuck because there's not enough space there. Let's move that out. Let's also go back to our physics and bring the density. Let's bring that friction and air drag down and go ahead and preview. You can see falls off to that side. Now, if we want, let's take these here, there, there, move that there. Take our solid, and this time we're going to take the force of gravity and we're going to bring it down to -1. Okay, now watch what happens as it goes up. It goes and it rolls around there. Now, what you can do in gameplay, you can have those bumpers out there and show the bumpers, or what I like to do and what we're going to do in our game is I'm going to hide those bumpers, make them invisible, and then I'm going to use that to adjust the movement. You can see what happened there. It gives it something that's doesn't really work with straight old physics applied. So you're giving it what they would call like a little English. You're making it move in directions. You can predict the directions that you want it to go by placing those bumpers in certain areas, and you can animate the bumpers as well to make them move back and forth and create timing elements in physics. I'll show that video some other time. But that is your basic primer on physics, and what we're going to do is take what we learned here and we're going to come back to the gameplay, and we're going to set up our scaffold here, and we're going to apply our physics to the gameplay scene. I'll see you in a bit.